In this video, I'm going to walk you through the basics of using Visual Studio to debug your C++ code. This is a really important skill. You're going to want to utilize it whenever you're writing C++ code in Visual Studio. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write a couple lines of code here just to sort of set up some stuff that we can debug with. I'm going to create a variable A. I'm going to create a pointer that references that variable A. And then I'll output, I'll output the value of A. And I'll also output the value of the pointer. Okay, I'm going to save this thing and then execute it. And I execute it by hitting this play button up here. Now, when I hit this button up here to execute it, it's actually attaching the Visual Studio debugger to the code as it's running. Right? I'll tell you what that means a little more in a second. So here you can see I printed hello world and then 5 immediately afterwards. And it's because I don't have a new line or anything here at the end of my hello world statement. And then I got this number here. Now, this number here is the value of P. It's the memory address that P is holding on to. So I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. Now, the first thing with debugging that's really important is the idea of breakpoints. Breakpoints, which can be toggled on either using F9, the hotkey F9, or you can toggle them on by going to debug toggle breakpoint right here. You can also toggle them on and off by clicking in this margin over here, and it will toggle breakpoints on and off at individual lines. Breakpoints allow your code to stop executing at a certain point so that you can inspect what's going on. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here on line 8. Go ahead and hit run. And we can see we're now presented with this window. So Visual Studio has completely changed itself. We've got a few more windows over here about like memory and CPU usage. I've got a call stack down here. I've got these windows down here of auto, local, threads, modules, watch, so on and so forth, right? There's a breakpoints window down here. And there's a lot of stuff that I can really use to my advantage to figure out what's going on in my code. And I'm just going to go through at a high level the most fundamental things. The first thing is notice that our program is running, but it is stopped. So it's stopped at this after it did hello world, and it hasn't yet executed this line. Now, this yellow arrow right here on my breakpoint, this indicates the next line of code that it is about to execute. So let's go ahead and execute one line of code. Now, the buttons I can use to kind of step through my code line by line are either up here. You can see that there's a step into. If there's a function call here, it'll go into that function. Step over, which will just go to the next line of code. And then step out, where it's like if I'm inside of a function, I can work my way out of that function. I'm going to go ahead and step over, right? There's a couple other buttons up here. If you want to stop executing, stop debugging completely, you can hit the stop button. If you want to just continue running, and not do line by line debugging anymore, you can just hit this continue button and it will run until it hits the next breakpoint. So for example, I could put another breakpoint here, come up here, hit continue, and it would execute until it hits this next breakpoint. I come back to my window, I can see it's printed hello world 5. That's because it's run this first statement, but it hasn't run the second one yet. Okay, when we're stopped on a line like this, there's a bunch of really cool things we can look at. The first thing is that I want to draw your attention to is the call stack window down here in the bottom right. If you have a series of functions, this tells you how you got here, which functions you're currently within, and which functions, were called to get to where you are. One of the great things about this is if you're inside of a function, you can double click any of the other portions in the call stack to hop out to other sections of your code to do any sort of variable inspection. And once you start writing your code and once you start digging into more complex stuff, I highly encourage you to play around the call stack. The next thing is the autos window. The autos window puts a handful of variables here and it shows you what the current values are. So I can see that the variable A currently has a value of 5. P currently has a value of this, which is the memory address of A. That's what it's been assigned to. I can also hover my mouse over the individual variable and it'll tell me this has a value of 5. P has this value here, which is a memory address 0113FCB0, and A has this, right? One of the neat things about debugging is if I want to change the value of 5 while this is running, or the value of A while it's running, I can double click down here and I could say, I want A to actually be equal to 50, and it will update that variable without even executing a line of code. Like A is now equal to 50. I just like set it. So you can really like play around and tweak your code as you're going, right? These are the fundamental things to do when debugging. It allows you to inspect variables, allows you to execute line by line by using these commands up here. And you can really follow along the path of how your code is executing. 95% of the bugs that you encounter can be solved using the debugger like this.